My girlfriend abandoned me 15 minutes before our Miami flight where I was going to propose. But when I discovered her supervisor was also being deceived, I confronted her with him, and her entire life collapsed. I'm 30 years old, work in financial consulting, and 6 months ago I planned what was going to be the best weekend of my life. I had saved for almost a year for a luxury trip to Miami, where I was going to propose to my girlfriend Jessica on our 3-year anniversary. I bought the ring, booked an incredible beachfront resort, planned every detail like it was a military operation, and all I asked for was that those 5 days would be perfect. But well, things didn't turn out exactly like I imagined. And when I say they didn't turn out like I imagined, I mean everything exploded in the most spectacular and painful way possible. I guess I should start from the beginning, when I still believed Jessica was the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I met Jessica like 3.5 years ago at a work conference, one of those where everyone is kind of bored drinking bad coffee and pretending they're interested in the 15th PowerPoint presentation of the day. She worked in human resources for a tech company, was 28 years old, and there was something about her that just captivated me from the moment we started talking. She was funny, smart, ambitious, and seemed to understand me in a way nobody else had. We became a couple like 2 months after meeting, and honestly, I thought I had found my person. You know, that connection everyone says you'll feel when you find the right one. My parents adored her. My friends said we were the perfect couple, and I was completely convinced we were going to grow old together. Last year, I think it was in October or November, I started planning the proposal. I wanted it to be special, not just propose to her in some random place. Jessica had always said she'd love to go to Miami, that she'd never been to a real luxury resort, one of those super fancy ones, so I started saving. I set serious goals, like I stopped going out as much with my friends, ate at home almost always, canceled subscriptions. I wasn't using basically anything to gather enough money. I also looked for the perfect ring, one I knew she would love because I had paid attention for months to the comments she made when we watched movies or passed by jewelry stores. I spent like 3 months' salary on that ring. I'm not gonna lie, but it was worth it because I loved her and wanted that moment to be unforgettable. By February of this year, I had everything ready. I booked a 5-star resort right on South Beach, with a suite that had an ocean view and the whole package. Spa, private dinners on the beach, excursions, literally everything that could make those 5 days magical. The trip coincided perfectly with our 3-year anniversary and also with her 29th birthday. So it was like the perfect storm of important dates. I told her it was a combined anniversary and birthday surprise, to take the days off work because we were going to Miami. She got really excited at first, hugged me, told me I was the best boyfriend in the world, all those things you want to hear when you're doing something special for the person you love. But like a month before the trip, Jessica started acting weird. I can't explain it exactly, but there was something different about her. She was spending a lot more time with her best friend Alexis. They went out almost every night after work, and when I asked her what they were doing, she just said they needed to catch up, or that they were planning something for a friend. I didn't think much about it, honestly. We all have our friends and need our space, but there were moments when I'd see her checking her phone and hiding the screen when I got close, or she'd go to another room to answer calls. Looking back, all the signs were there, but I was so focused on making the trip perfect that I basically ignored everything I didn't want to see. The week before the trip was when things got weirder. Jessica was distant, like mentally absent even when we were together. I asked her several times if everything was okay, if something had happened at work or with her family, and she always said no, that she was just tired or stressed. I told her the trip would be perfect for her, that we could disconnect from everything and just enjoy, and she'd nod but never seemed really excited. I should have seen that as a giant red flag, but I was so in my head with the proposal and everything I had planned that I simply assumed I was being paranoid. 2 days before leaving, I received an email in my personal account confirming a work meeting for the day of our flight at 8 inches the morning. I was confused because I hadn't scheduled any meeting, and when I checked the details, I saw that the email had been sent from my account, but I hadn't sent it. I asked Jessica if she knew anything about it, and she told me no, that it was probably a mistake, or maybe Lisa, my assistant, had used my account for something. I believed her because, well, why wouldn't I believe her? We'd I've been together 3 years and she'd never given me a real reason to distrust her. I called Lisa the next day and she told me she had no idea what meeting I was talking about, that she hadn't sent any email from my account, and that's when I started to feel something was very wrong. The day of the trip arrived, and I was ready to leave for the airport at 5 inches the morning, because our flight left at 9. Jessica had said she'd sleep over at my apartment the night before so we could leave together, but like at 10 at night, she sent me a message saying Alexis had an emergency and that she needed to go with her, that we'd see each other at the airport. I told her no problem, that I hoped Alexis was okay, and we agreed to meet directly at the airport. At 5:30 inches the morning, I was in my car driving to the airport. I called Jessica to confirm she was on her way, and she didn't answer. I sent her messages, nothing. At 7 inches the morning, I was already at the airport, and she still wasn't answering calls or messages. 8 o'clock passed, 8:30, and Jessica didn't show up. I was starting to panic because the flight was leaving in less than half an hour and she had simply disappeared. I called like 20 times, sent her messages asking if she was okay, if she'd had an accident, anything, and nothing. Finally, at 8:45, 15 minutes before the flight would leave, I received a message from her that said, "Sorry, I won't be able to go. Something came up with work. You go and enjoy." I stood there in the middle of the airport reading that message over and over without being able to process what was happening. Something came up with work? Really? On the day of our anniversary and her birthday? After I had spent all this money and time planning this? I called her immediately, and she answered on the third ring. I asked her what the hell was going on, and she told me in a super casual voice, like nothing, that her boss Michael had scheduled a last-minute meeting she couldn't miss, that it was super important for her career, and that she was really sorry but I should go alone and enjoy the resort. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her this was our anniversary, that we had planned this trip for months, that I had spent all my savings on this, and she just said, "Well, Nathan, not everything can always be how you plan it. Sometimes things happen." That's when I knew something was definitely very wrong, but I still had no idea how wrong things really were. I ended up getting on the plane alone, completely devastated and confused. During the whole flight, I tried to understand what had happened. I reviewed our conversations from the last few weeks looking for some clue that this was going to happen, and I found nothing. When I arrived at the resort in Miami, like at 2 inches the afternoon, I checked in alone in that giant suite that was supposed to be for both of us, and I sat on the bed looking at the ocean, thinking about when everything had gone to hell. I tried to call Jessica several more times during the afternoon, but she didn't answer, so I decided maybe I just needed to cool my head and that we'd talk when she was less busy with her supposed work meeting. That night, I think it was like 9 or 10, I was on the suite's balcony drinking a beer and decided to check Instagram because, I don't know, I guess I needed to distract myself somehow. I started scrolling and suddenly I see a story from Alexis, Jessica's best friend, and I almost dropped my phone. In the story, you could clearly see the lobby of the same resort where I was, with Alexis making a toast with champagne, and behind her, you could see Jessica laughing with 2 guys I didn't know. I had to watch the story like 5 times because my brain simply couldn't process what I was seeing. My girlfriend, who was supposedly in a super important work meeting, was literally in the same resort as me, a few floors away probably, partying with her friend and 2 random guys. I don't know how to describe what I felt in that moment. It was like someone had punched me in the stomach with all their strength, and at the same time thrown a bucket of ice water in my face. I felt my hands shaking as I saved the screenshot of the story, and my first instinct was to go look for her all over the resort and confront her. But something stopped me. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to have all the information before doing anything. I stayed awake all night, basically stalking Alexis and Jessica's social media, and I saw more stories of them taking shots at the resort bar, dancing, clearly having an amazing time, while I was alone in my room, feeling like my world was falling apart. The next morning, like 7 inches the morning, I called her. She answered, after several rings, and I could hear she was still half asleep. I told her, "Jessica, I need you to tell me the truth. Where are you?" There was a long silence, and then she said, "At home." "Why?" I told her. "Don't lie to me. I know you're in Miami." I saw Alexis's Instagram stories. Another silence, and then she started laughing. But it wasn't a normal laugh. It was like a bitter and cruel laugh. She told me, "Okay, Nathan, yes, I'm in Miami." "So what?" I asked her how she got there, with what money, who she was with, and she told me in this super casual voice that gave me chills, "I used your email to cancel your fake meeting and changed my ticket to come a day early. I'm with Alexis and some friends, and honestly, we're having way more fun than I would have had with you." In that moment, I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I asked her what she meant by that, and she kept talking, and every word was like a knife. She told me I was boring, that I was always planning things and trying to control everything, that she needed more excitement in her life, and that frankly, it was lucky I hadn't proposed to her because she would have said no. How did she know about the proposal? I asked her, and she laughed again and said, "Please, Nathan, you're so obvious. I saw the ring weeks ago when I was looking for some documents in your apartment." I told her, "So you knew what this trip meant, and you still decided to ruin it and steal my reservation to come get drunk with strangers." She said, "They're not strangers, they're friends. And yes, basically." And then she hung up. I sat there in that hotel room looking at the phone without being able to move. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part wanted to destroy something. But the biggest part of me just felt a cold and calculating rage I had never experienced before. This woman, who I had loved for 3 years, with whom I had planned my future, had just admitted she had deliberately sabotaged the most important trip of my life just to come have fun with other guys. And not only that, she had used my own email account to create the fake meeting that would make me miss the flight, had changed her ticket without telling me anything, basically had planned all this to steal my trip while leaving me believing she was at home working. So I did something I probably should have thought through better, but in that moment seemed completely justified. I called the hotel and explained the situation, told them I needed to cancel the entire reservation, except my room because the other person who was supposed to come with me had used the reservation without my permission. The receptionist was super kind and understanding, told me she could cancel Jessica's reservation without a problem and that they would refund me what was left of those days. I also canceled all the activities I had booked for her, the spa, the dinners, the excursions, literally everything. Then I called the airline and canceled her return flight. If she wanted to come to Miami to have fun without me, fine, but it wasn't going to be with my money or my help. Like at 2 inches the afternoon, I got a call from Jessica. She was hysterical, screaming that I was a psychopath. How dare I cancel her hotel, stay, that now she had nowhere to stay or how to get home. I told her very calmly, "Jessica, you decided to come on this trip without me, using my reservation without my permission, so now it's your problem to find where to stay and how to get back." She started crying and saying this was abuse, that I couldn't leave her stranded like that, and I just told her, "You should have thought about that before betraying me and stealing the trip I planned for us." And I hung up. I blocked her number, blocked Alexis, and decided that if I was going to be in Miami alone, at least I was going to try not to let this situation completely ruin my time there. But I couldn't just leave it at that. I called Jessica's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, who had always been super good to me. I told them the whole story, from planning the trip to what had just happened, and Mrs. Anderson started crying on the phone. She told me she had no idea her daughter was capable of doing something like that she was completely embarrassed and so sorry. Mr. Anderson told me I had done the right thing, canceling everything, that Jessica needed to learn that actions have consequences, and that they weren't going to rescue her from this situation. I thanked them for understanding and for their support, and they told me that no matter what happened with Jessica, they considered me part of their family and that they regretted things had ended this way. During the next 2 days, Jessica called me from different numbers like 50 times. I didn't answer any call. She sent me messages from other people's accounts, begging me to send her money for a hotel, for food, for the flight back, basically for everything. I ignored every message. Eventually, like 3 days later, I found out from Mrs. Anderson that Jessica had to borrow money from a friend in Miami to be able to stay in a cheap hostel and buy a bus ticket back home. Apparently, Alexis had returned on her original flight and had left Jessica alone, because I guess even friends have limits when it comes to supporting behavior that terrible. But here's where the story gets even more interesting, because I'm not someone who leaves things half done. When I was on the plane back home, I started thinking about those two guys who were with Jessica and Alexis in the Instagram photos. One of them seemed familiar to me somehow. So I started looking at the photos more closely, and suddenly I realized where I knew him from. It was Michael, Jessica's supervisor at work, the same Michael who supposedly had scheduled the last-minute meeting that prevented her from coming on the trip. Everything started making sense in the most horrible way possible. When I got home, I started investigating like a private detective. I found Michael's LinkedIn profile, searched his social media, and basically confirmed it was definitely him who was in Miami with Jessica. So I did something that probably sounds crazy, but I needed to know the complete truth. I sent Talum a direct message through LinkedIn, explaining who I was, that I had been in a 3-year relationship with Jessica, and that I had seen him in the photos with her in Miami. I asked him directly if there was anything between them. Michael responded to me like 2 hours later, and his message basically confirmed my worst suspicions. He told me he had been dating Jessica for the last 6 months, that she had told him she was single, and that he had no idea I existed until I sent him that message. He shared screenshots of their conversations where Jessica was clearly acting like she was his girlfriend, making plans, sending him photos, everything. Michael was furious. Told me he also felt betrayed because he really liked Jessica and had thought they had something real, and that he couldn't believe she had been living a double life all this time. We decided we needed to confront her together. We planned a video call, where basically both of us were going to face her at the same time with all the evidence. It was probably one of the most surreal things I've done in my life. When she answered the call and saw that both Michael and I were there, her face went completely white. She tried to hang up, but Michael yelled at her to stay and listen to what we had to say. During the next 30 minutes, we basically destroyed her with questions and evidence. Every time she tried to lie or justify herself, one of us pulled out a screenshot or a message that proved she was lying. In the end, she broke down and started crying, admitting everything. That yes, she had been dating both of us. That she didn't know how it had gotten so far. That she was so sorry. Basically all the things someone says when they're caught and have no option but to confess. Michael told me after that call that he was going to report Jessica to Human Resources because technically she had violated company policies by having a relationship with her direct supervisor without reporting it, and also because she had lied about work situations to cover her personal behavior. I told him to do what he thought was right, that I was already done with her and that each of us had to handle the situation as we saw fit. 2 weeks later, Michael wrote me to tell me Jessica had been fired. Apparently, when Human Resources started investigating the situation, several coworkers came forward saying Jessica had inappropriate behavior with other employees too, and that they had been uncomfortable but didn't know how to report it. The company decided it was better to terminate her contract. The consequences for Jessica were like a domino effect that didn't stop. She lost her job, lost Michael obviously, lost me. Her parents were so disappointed they basically told her they couldn't look at her the same way. Alexis stopped talking to her because she realized Jessica had used her to cover her lies, and basically her entire social life fell apart. Mrs. Anderson called me like a month after all this to tell me Jessica had to move to a smaller apartment because she couldn't afford the one she had without her job, and that she was seeing a therapist trying to understand why she had done all these things. Honestly, part of me felt a little sorry for her, but the bigger part remembered how she had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible and thought she deserved every consequence. I decided to take the rest of the time I had planned for that trip and went back to Miami like 2 months later. This time completely alone and with a totally different mindset. I didn't go to propose or to fulfill any romantic dream. I went because I realized I deserved to enjoy that place without it being contaminated by the memories of what Jessica had done. I spent 5 incredible days meeting new people, doing the activities I had planned, eating at the restaurants I had reserved, and basically reclaiming that experience for myself. It was liberating in a way I can't explain. Like I felt I was closing that chapter of my life and opening a new one where I was the priority. Jessica tried to contact me several times during the following months. She sent me long messages from new numbers explaining she was in therapy, that she understood she had destroyed everything, that she wanted the chance to explain herself face to face. I ignored every message for months, Until finally, like 3 weeks ago, she showed up at my apartment. I don't know how she got past building security, but there she was, knocking on my door at 8 at night on a Wednesday. When I opened and saw her standing there with red eyes from crying, part of me felt that old connection we had had. But it only lasted a second before I remembered everything she had done. She asked me to let her in to talk, that she just needed 5 minutes. I told her no, that I had nothing to say to her, and she had nothing I wanted to hear. She started crying harder, saying she had changed, that therapy had helped her understand her problems, that she loved me, and it had been the worst decision of her life to hurt me like that. I just told her, Jessica, I don't know if you've really changed or not, and honestly, I don't care. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate decisions you made for months while looking me in the face every day and telling me you loved me. That's not something you forgive. With therapy and apologies, that's something that defines you as a person, and the person you are is not someone I want to be with ever again. I closed the door on her, and that was the last time I talked to her. Now I'm focused on rebuilding my life without her. I sold the ring and used that money to take a trip to Europe I had always wanted to take. I started going out more with my friends, met new people, basically remembered what it was like to live without constantly worrying about someone else. Jessica's parents still talk to me from time to see how I am, which is weird but also kind of nice because they really were like a second family to me. Mrs. Anderson told me last week that Jessica moved to another city to start over, that she got a job in sales or something, and that basically she's trying to rebuild her life from scratch. I wish her luck with that, honestly, but from afar, very far away. That part of my life is closed, and I have no interest in opening it again.